Ladies and gentlemen, wadau, radarada, mko fiti, mko freshi, mko sambamba, asanta sana. Hey, Kenyan politics maze. Kenyan politics, bro. Ay. So, if you've been paying close attention to Kenyan politics, you realize that recently, John Mbadi, Ndindi Nyoro, and Safaricom have been trending on socials. And it's all because the Kenyan government wants to sell 15% of its stake in Safaricom. But Ndindi Nyoro is against that transaction because in his own analysis, he believes that Safaricom is being undervalued. Therefore, he is proposing that the government should open up the bid and attract more potential buyers so that the country can earn a significant amount of money from that transaction. So guys, in this video, I want us to define some key terminologies and also interrogate the ideas of John Mbadi and Ndindi Nyoro and determine whose ideas are better for this country in the long run. So without further ado, let's get after this thing.
We'll come back and look at the agreement, the 9 points, the agenda, but we do want to play this clip by Kiharu MP Ndindi Nyoro because, as you quoted, saying that it's an example of selling government assets in an opaque manner without giving taxpayers value for their money. But let's listen into what he had to say and then come back and react to it.
The government of Kenya is proposing to sell Safaricom PLC, the 15% stake, at 34 shillings. Kenyans need to know that Safaricom shares were trading at an average of 45 shillings in 2021, valuing Safaricom PLC at 1.8 trillion Kenya shillings in 2021. And of course, that is before Safaricom even invested in Ethiopia, an investment that is actually becoming a very good decision for Safaricom.
Mm-hmm. We'll hear this often, and I know...
But he's making sense, isn't he? I mean, if in 2021 this company was valued at 1.8 trillion shillings before it went to Ethiopia, before it expanded this way, if in 2021 the share was at 45 shillings, right? Surely this company is valued at more than 2 trillion shillings at present.
So now, for those who don't understand how Ndindi Nyoro arrived to that particular figure, in 2021, issued shares, the Safaricom, zilikuwa 40 billion shares. So what Ndindi Nyoro has done, he has taken 40 billion shares, akai multiply by 45 shillings, ndio amepata hiyo 1.8 trillion Kenyan shillings. Are we together up to that? To get the market value of a company, amechukua shares, akai multiply na value of a share. Even though imekuwa hiyo hesabu.
You know, we need some fact check on what Ndindi is saying because he's mixing me. First, is he talking about the valuation of the firm or the share prices? These are totally different things. You know, when you value a firm as an entity.
This guy has to confuse, sawa. You know, the valuation of the firm and the share, the price of shares, these things are correlated. So you use the other one to determine the other one. So usikue usichanganyikiwe sana. I'll explain it later. Sawa. I hope tuko pamoja hadi hapo.
The value of the firm would be different. It is not the same as the value of the shares. These are totally, it's basic accounting knowledge. And I believe Ndindi, what is his background? Is he an economist? If he's an economist, he should also know that I know the economists are not strong in valuation. This is the forte of accountants. But the bottom line is the value of the shares is not equal to the value of the firm. Because I saw some write-up, I didn't watch his entire interview or press statement, that he's talking about the value of Safaricom as today could be 2.5 trillion or something like that. Fine, it could be that. But we are not selling as a going concern, as an entity. Safaricom, we are offloading. We are divesting shares. And so you can say shares can only be sold at market price. What is the present, even without talking about 2021 or 2032, what is the price of shares of Safaricom today? So what we did was to get the average price of shares for the last 6 months, and weighted average put her somewhere, and there is a premium on top of it. Can he dispute that? Let him just calculate the price get the price, and you don't need any research. You just get the data from Nairobi Securities Exchange and see what is the price of shares of Safaricom and average it and see if because what you are selling is the shares. It's not the farm as such. So
that part is understood.
Yeah.
He was also talking about share prices having gone down over time. I think, is he alluding to, so 45 shillings a share in 2021 to now we are playing at 28, 29.
Yeah, so if the share prices have gone down,
yes,
do we go and tell these people that we have to sell it to us in the price that it was in 2020? We never know, even tomorrow it can go down further. The share prices, I'm not saying that is what will happen, but it may go down further. But let me just point out something. You know, when we are in leadership, we should also be responsible and be consistent. If you played the clip of Ndindi Nyoro when he was in Tanga group, no, before he became chair of budget, Tanga group, he told Uhuru's government, point blank, that instead of borrowing more money, sell shares in Safaricom. He was not even general. It was very specific. Sell shares in Safaricom, raise money, and do what you want in terms of development. That is exactly what we are doing today. And because he has gone, I don't know which group he's in. I don't understand.
But he's still in Kenya Kwanza. He's a UDA MP.
But there are so many UDA MPs who are not UDA.
He hasn't announced anything, so we assume that where we last saw him.
That's a good assumption. And again, lastly, and by the way, I wish he was here, but let me just put it. I believe Ndindi Nyoro was very integral in Kenya Kwanza campaign and the generation of manifesto. Let him go and read that manifesto and come and tell us what is in it. The manifesto of Kenya Kwanza speaks to privatizing state-owned enterprises to raise money for National Infrastructure Fund. It is also in Azimio. At least for Azimio, I can speak with authority because I sat for days, including weekends, in a room around along Fair Acre Road in Karen, as we were working on the ODM, on the Azimio manifesto. And I know that one of our strategies was to raise money for infrastructure through privatization of state-owned enterprise. So there is nothing out of ordinary.
So now that is John Badi explaining to us why it is a good idea to sell the 15% stake and why we are selling a share at 34 shillings. First of all, let us understand the ownership pale Safaricom. Sawa. I want you to know that the government of Kenya does not own 100% of Safaricom. There is a company called Vodafone or Vodacom, and that company owns around 40% of Safaricom. Alafu kuja hapo chini, you get Kenya, the government of Kenya owns 35% of Safaricom. Alafu 25% of Safaricom is owned by the public and other private entities. So saizi, that is how the ownership stands before each transaction happened. But after this transaction happens, if the transaction goes through and the government of Kenya succeeds to sell the 15% to Vodacom, because the company that wants to buy the 15% stake that Kenya is selling is Vodacom, another majority owner hapo hivyo Safaricom. So if Kenyans or if the government sells 15% to Vodacom, then Vodacom watakuwa wana own 55% of Safaricom. Kenya or the government of Kenya will be owning 20% of Safaricom, and the rest, your 25%, will be owned by the public and other private entities. I hope tuko sawa hadi hapo hivyo. And the second thing I want us to look at before we proceed is this figure. I know you've probably heard it or you've read it somewhere. These are 204.3 billion Kenyan shillings, an equivalent to 1.6 billion US dollars. How did they exactly arrive at that particular figure? They arrived there after multiplying the number of share the government of Kenya wants to sell by the cost of a share. So in this particular case, the 15% stake is an equivalent to 6.01 billion shares. So in short, the government of Kenya wants to sell 6.01 billion shares in Safaricom. And every single share is going for 34 Kenyan shillings. So unachukua 34 times 6.01 billion, you arrive at 204.3 billion Kenyan shillings, which is an equivalent to 1.6 billion US dollars. I hope tuko sawa hadi hapo hivyo. The other confusion I see Kenyans struggle with is whether it is illegal to sell the shares in Safaricom. First of all, I wanna make sure you understand this. I just want to let you know that you are not supposed to be concerned about that because it is 100% legal. The government of Kenya has the ability to privatize institutions for the benefit of our country. So as long as our say what to proceed, now let as much money as possible, it is 100% legal. And to help me bring that point home, here is Bilo, a retired politician or a former Northeastern politician, and he was discussing the same thing on Sajid's podcast.
But that is the direction we need to go. Let us go into public-private partnership for some of the strategic things. There's nothing. I've seen people arguing saying, "Oh, you can't sell Safaricom shares 15." This is a strategic. There's nothing strategic about phones, a phone company nowadays. Nothing strategic about an airline. There are many countries that have airlines that don't have national airlines, and so we are living still. But it's all about people in opposition also want to reserve some of these things for their future when they hopefully get into power. So we always criticize. They said, "No, we will not support this. You are selling our country." But the bottom line is, why would government run KICC?
Yeah,
I mean, frankly, it's a building. It's not. That is the work of Salim to run real estate. But you want to run and there's no revenue coming in, and you are budgeting every year. You're giving KICC 2-3 billion every year to run. So it doesn't make sense. Somebody says, "No, this is a national asset." They are stealing. That's why they want to sell it. Yeah. So we become sometimes excited on these things. But the reality is government needs to cut down on some of these things because they're not adding any value. In fact, we're spending a lot of money on maintaining some of those institutions. If you look at how much money goes to state corporations, those 250 state corporations is crazy. That's why there has been so many recommendations by different task forces to merge some of these institutions or privatize them or sell them. Look, we had 11 sugar factories. I remember when I was a young man.
11 sugar factories.
And we were exporting sugar. Not even to EU. Yeah, in the 80s. Did you know that we were exporting sugar
to Egypt?
Now, all those sugar factories are government owned. And because they're government owned, they have all been run down. I was involved in the privatization of Mumias when it was doing very well. I was I did the IPO, we were as a share registrar. But today they have all been, so government doesn't need to be really running sugar. There are look at the private ones. All those private ones are running very well, making money. The government ones are all under receivership. So government says we want to give these things to some investors, and we say, no, we go to court. No. This is a national asset. So, we can't go. Let me tell you, we need as government to focus on service delivery. That's your responsibility. Security, infrastructure, those things that you have mandate for. But the moment you start selling eggs, and you want to sell sugar, and you want to sell taxis, and you want to sell other things, and you are providing your political cronies all those opportunities, me and you will just pay tax. The taxes will go to these guys.
There you go. That is Bilo Kero explaining exactly why we need to privatize most of these institutions. Because according to Bilo, we are using way too much money in servicing them, yet they are not producing enough return for us to see any advantage or any benefit in a regular mwananchi's life. Sawa. So at that juncture, I want us to get into another conversation, or I want us to look at something else, something fundamental here. Kuna hii mambo ya shares. Like people are hearing shares. What exactly is this shares? What exactly are shares? I know there are people who are watching this video right now who don't understand what exactly is a share. What is a company? What is a share? And how are these shares created? First of all, let Ndindi Nyoro, just explain to us what a share is, and then give more flesh to that, and then we have to understand shares before we proceed. Wadau here is Nyoro explaining what a share is.
When you're buying shares, don't look at you're buying. People imagine shares are these things people trade forex. No. Shares is, we are in this hotel today. This hotel has ownership. If it's owned by 10 people, those are the shareholders, they are owners. So when you're buying shares, it is like you are replacing one of the 10. That's how shares market is. You are replacing that other shareholder, because shares are not created for you. You buy ile iko na huyu na huyu na yule.
Yeah, Odao, that is Nyoro explaining what a share is. Just to add on what he said, so that I help you bring this point home, ni kwamba, there's a company, we have a company, and every single company maybe is owned by a particular one person or two people. But now, when a company wants to raise money, they have to, to bring in investors. And most of the time, they bring in these investors in form of shareholders. Now, a shareholder is someone who holds a bigger chunk of the company or a piece of company. If, for example, if your company has 10 shares, then someone who has 1 share has ownership. Someone who has 5 shares has ownership. Someone has 10 shares has ownership. But now, in this example where Safaricom is such a big company, Safaricom has, there are 2 categories of shares. I don't know if you're going to understand this. There is something called authorized shares, and then there is something called issued shares. Authorized shares is the maximum number of shares that a company is allowed to issue based on what their constitution says. And their constitution is usually something called the Articles of Association. So in Safaricom's case, they are allowed to issue around 120 billion shares. Lakini hizo 120 billion shares haziko kwa market saizi zote. The shares that have been issued by Safaricom to investors are only 40 billion shares. I hope you may understand. So first of all, a share is a piece of a company, and the company does not always offer all its shares. Where in offer hizo shares, in chunks, kidogo hivyo. I hope you may understand shares. So with that explanation out of the way, now let us look at, why does the government need money urgently? Why does the government need billions of dollars urgently, Is it because taxes zimekataa, wase hawana doya kulipa wase mishahara? What exactly is going on? And I want you to pay attention to what Mbadi is saying. I want you to pay attention to what Mbadi is saying, because Mbadi is confusing here. Nataka tu uelewe, because it's going to bring up the idea of sovereign wealth fund and the National Infrastructure Fund. I am going to lay all that out after he finishes explaining his thought process.
You are raising money with this diversity of Safaricom and this one from Kenya Pipeline. Okay? Mm-hmm. Where is this money going? Ni pesa ya kulipa watu mshahara ya February.
Yeah, actually, one of our listeners or viewers has actually asked whether we are going to use this money to pay debt.
Yes.
And KRA has missed target. Mm-hmm. Let me be very categorical here and clear. We have said, and I want to repeat it, that this is the money that we are going to raise out of the divestiture, either in KPC or offloading more shares in Safaricom. Mm-hmm. The money is not going to be used to fund 2025-2026 budget. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be used to fund 2026-2027 budget or any other budget. Mm-hmm. This money is going to be put into the National Infrastructure Fund, the bulk of it.
Listen to this guy, wadau. Hapo ndo ameanza. Hapo ndo ameanzia. I want you to pay close attention to what he's going to say. Sijui, just listen to this guy.
About 90%. National Infrastructure Fund will then be used to leverage and crowd in the private sector funding into commercially viable public infrastructure projects.
Yeah.
And that is the bottom line. And we have a list already which has been generated, and state departments are generating list of commercially viable projects that we can fund through National Infrastructure Fund. A portion of it, say about 10%, will go into sovereign wealth funds for the future generation. Again, the sovereign wealth fund can only be invested in 3 areas, or can only be applied in 3 areas. One, again, is infrastructure development. 2, it will be there for intergenerational wealth or intergenerational equity to provide money for the future generation. And lastly, it is for stabilization of the economy. In the event that we get a shock like what we had during COVID, and there is no international community to come through for us, we should have some resources to be able to take care of such shocks. So National Infrastructure Fund, how it will work, and I think this is what many people don't understand, and I don't blame them because it's a technical area that we need to explain. The National Infrastructure Fund, once it is set, what it will do is that we will come up with these infrastructure projects that are commercially viable.
Right.
And if you allow me time, I can mention a few of them that have already been identified.
We can, do that a bit later.
But once you identify a project, and I've given this example of JKIA, if we want to fund it through this model, and the costs of the project is about 200 billion, then you can decide that a portion of that, say 25%, which is a quarter, is let's say 50 billion, will be equity financed.
Right.
And the rest you can get through loan financing and such arrangement. And then you say 60% of the equity comes from the National Infrastructure Fund, which is government. That will be 30 billion. And the rest can come to the private sector. So the government will be telling private sector, here is the project, it has this return. Once it is complete, it will take this number of years to pay back, and this is the revenue flow stream. You do a design, you do all that assessment, and you put it out there. And you say, as a government, we are putting 30 billion. Now, we are asking Mariam and any other person who has money to come in.
Yeah.
Then you do a project which could have taken money from our budget, where we would have borrowed money, we'd have gone to the market to borrow money to do JKIA and take 30 years to repay, and yet the loans are short term.
Yeah.
Most loans are 5 years to 10 years. It would be a strain in our economy. But if you bring investors who have a long-term view, most investors want to put their money where they can recoup their investment even over 30 years. So that is what we want to do with this fund. It is not for consumption. This is for asset investment. It's like we are converting one asset to another asset, and also an asset that can spur economic growth into the economy. So it is optimizing use of assets, if I may use that word as a finance expert. We are trying to optimize our asset, mature assets. These are called mature assets. And if I find time, I will lecture you on what a mature asset means.
Okay.
So that's what I would say. And to answer all our friends who have asked, this money is not going to be used to fund our budget. So yes, we have fiscal strain. That's a fact. But we are not going to directly use this money to pay debts, to pay salaries. In a sense, how it is going to help us manage our our budget, is that once we take these infrastructure projects to the National Infrastructure Fund, we will remove them from our budget. And that will create a space for us in the budget now to fund health, to fund education, and to fund other recurrent expenditure, and even other development which are not commercially viable.
Do you have an example that you can give of a country that has done this?
Yeah.
You can say, X country needed to build this kind of infrastructure, and they used their funds this way.
By the way, almost all countries that have developed, this is what they do.
Give us one.
I'll tell you.
One project.
I will tell you. For example, if you take the case which has been given on Norway, Norway has a sovereign wealth fund.
Yes, a very good one.
And that sovereign wealth fund is not just developing projects, infrastructure projects in Norway, across the globe. Actually, Norway now as a country can run its budget without taxing their people almost forever, because they have the resources. Even Saudi Arabia, but that is from sovereign wealth fund. These countries had the advantage that they are, because they have the advantage of having natural resources, which we may not be having in Kenya. But the difference is not there. It is the same. If you can get money from natural resources, or you can get money from your mature assets, and you fund. Take the case of country like China, for example. China has institutions which are so established, and these institutions are the ones that make resources available. Of course, there is hedging, there is a blending by government-owned institutions. Like when you talk about Exim Bank of China, what is it all about? Exim Bank was set up by government funds. You talk about China Development Bank, but these banks now are leveraging. These banks are helping in investment in public infrastructure, and they have even gone out globally to help in other countries. Who knows if this our infrastructure fund in future, maybe not in our generation, but in future, if it is well established, we will go out into the region and develop infrastructure in other regions and get money, get paid, and the country can run even without taxing its citizens.
In a very ideal scenario, but then I have so
it's
many
not ideal.
questions.
You know, let me tell you, Mariam.
Only if it's done right.
Let me tell you.
Only if it's done
those
right.
countries which have reached where they have reached, they started.
I agree.
Yes. And by the way, the people who started never even witnessed or enjoyed the benefits of their sweat.
Agreed.
It is for another generation.
You know where the gap is for us? It's not about the potential here. It's about the how, right? And if we do it right.
It's a trust.
It's a trust, the deficit that plagues us.
Do you have a reason not to trust me?
Not to trust you. No, I have no reason not to trust you. But I don't think you're the only player in this entire on the field. So let me start with the ring fencing of it, right? How exactly is this money ring fenced to bolster public trust that indeed this is going to the National Infrastructure Fund? And the infrastructure fund itself, how are we assured that it will do what it is meant to do? It will not be co-opted into something else. We'll not hear 2, 3, 5 years from now about the infrastructure bond. I mean, the infrastructure scandal. You know how it goes here. That trust.
You see, I understand you, Mariam, but I think it is important that we sat back as Kenyans and ask ourselves, why is it that we distrust ourselves this much? That we believe that there's nothing we can do right. And by the way, yes, Kenyans could be corrupt, but do we stop doing things because we are corrupt?
Yes, that is exactly what we do. We stop doing things until we learn honesty, transparency, and integrity. Because we can't keep investing money in projects and thieves keep stealing money, corruption, left, right, and center. We can't keep losing money, bwana. And you have to consider the fact that Kenya right now is not a low-income country. We are a middle-income country. And as a middle-income country, we don't get to enjoy some privileges we used to enjoy, when we were a low-income country, like write-offs by the likes of the IMF, World Bank, and the USA. No, right now, when we owe someone money, we gotta pay it. We gotta pay it in cash, or we gotta look for alternatives to pay that money. So we can't be playing the same games. Now, like the games are, the rules are different. We are going to play this game by our rules. Now, to get back to the confusion that Mbadi is causing here with mixing the terms like the National Infrastructure Fund, the NIF, with the term like Sovereign Wealth Fund. First of all, I want you to understand that there is a very big difference. There is a very big difference. There is no similarity between a sovereign wealth fund and a national infrastructure fund. Okay? So in Mbadi's own words, out of the 240 billion Kenyan shillings, and I hope you understand kwamba the 40 billion Kenyan shillings imeongezeka kwa sababu ya dividends zenye Kenya itapatiwa on top of the 204 billion Kenyan shillings. I hope tuko sawa hadi hapo hivyo. So Mbadi say that out of that pool of money, they are going to take away 10% and establish something called the Sovereign Wealth Fund. So now, a Sovereign Wealth Fund is very different from a national infrastructure fund that is going to consume 90% of the 240 billion Kenyan shillings. The nature of the national infrastructure fund is spending. We are going to spend that money on developing our country, on infrastructure, building roads, constructing bridges, constructing seaports, constructing power plants. But now, the Sovereign Wealth Fund, enye itakuwa allocated 24 billion Kenyan shillings. 24 billion Kenyan shillings is an equivalent to 185 million US dollars. Hiyo ni pesa kidogo sana. But now the Sovereign Wealth Fund is something that has to be saved and invested to accrue so that the future generation wapate kuenjoy hiyo do. They get to enjoy the money that we are saving for them right now as we speak. But umesikia Mbadi anasema kwamba they are again going to use the Sovereign Wealth Fund to as emergency funds during during moments where we are experiencing pandemics such as the coronavirus. They are going to use that money sometimes to develop roads, and then they are supposed to use the same money for intergenerational wealth. It doesn't make sense, because in countries such as Norway, they don't really touch that money. Acha nikusomee something hapa hivi interesting. Okay, Norway has something called the Government Pension Fund Global, and this is the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, wadau. Norway has the largest sovereign wealth fund in the entire world. So these people, there is oil in Norway. So what they decided to do is, okay, we have this oil, we are going to use part of the revenue we are collecting from exporting oil to other countries, and we are going to use it and develop our country right now. But the majority of the revenue, or the majority of the oil money, is going to be saved and invested. How are they investing the money? Wadau, listen. The purpose of the Sovereign Wealth Fund is for future generations. They are not spending it right now. They are not using that money to, for coronavirus or for development, stuff like that. They are using that money. They are investing globally in stocks, bonds, and real estate. The Norway Sovereign National Fund is not for building roads or ports or power plants. It's for savings and investment only, wadau. Now, let us look at China. China is something called the China Investment Corporation, the CIC. But how the CIC has been structured and how the CIC operates is very different from how the NIF is going to be structured and how the NIF is going to function. Because the CIC invests in global assets, vitu kama stocks, bonds, so it generates money for China. But the NIF, the National Infrastructure Fund, is not going to be an investment plan. It's not going to be an investment vehicle. It is not going to bring us any returns. No. It is that money is going to be used to develop our infrastructure in Kenya. And that is if accountability has been considered and everything goes as planned. Are we together? So there's a very big difference between a sovereign wealth fund and NIF. And Mbadi is confusing people here. The sovereign wealth fund in many countries is making money for those countries. But in Kenya, what we want to set up is a vehicle whereby we are going to spend money on infrastructure. Are we together? Sawa. So wadau, in this segment, I want us to look at the pricing and why exactly is the government okay with 34 Kenyan shillings per share when it is possible to open up the bid and attract global investors to encourage competition, and maybe that competition will increase the value of a share. Exactly what Ndindi Nyoro wants. So wadau, let's take a look at this.
Why? That's the question.
Why this transaction is necessary?
Why is the government of Kenya selling the family silver?
Yes, so this is the reason I want to lay the foundation. We are at a point in this country where we still need infrastructural development. That's a fact. For us to realize economic growth that would create job opportunities, we need at least 7% economic growth. We are growing at 5%.
Every single time unasikia the word economic growth, don't get excited. Sawa. So when Mbadi is saying that as a country, we need to develop our infrastructure to facilitate the 6 to 7% economic growth, don't be like, yeah, that's a good idea. Because economic growth does not always mean that people are living a good life or a dignified life in a country. Economic development is what we are supposed to be focused on. Economic growth is about creating wealth. Economic development is about distributing the wealth. When a country is economically developed, the living standards of people improves. And that is what we need in this country. We need better hospitals, we need better schools, we need education, we need to live in good houses. That is exactly what happens. When a country is economically developed, all of a sudden, people are happy. Economic development gives people a good feeling. Life expectancy increases or goes up. That is what we are supposed to be focused on as a country. But hii mambo ya economic growth, sometimes you might have a big economy, a huge economy, trillions of dollars, but people are still suffering. People are not employed. People are not getting opportunities in that country. So every single time ukisikia hii word, politicians wanapenda ku throw this word around. Let it not confuse you. Sawa?
Maybe next year it will be 5.3. So we are still struggling. Now, you cannot grow an economy where you have a lot of infrastructural challenges. Major roads, I will give you examples. Our largest trading partner is Uganda. The road leading to Uganda has challenges. You sometimes take a day before you move from Nairobi to the border. Our next neighbor is Tanzania. To reach the border of Tanzania, there's usually challenges because the road leading to the border, that is Namanga, is not the class of road that you'd want to connect you to your major trading partners. And many other major and commercially viable, so to speak, roads. In terms of agricultural production, we are over-dependent on and over-reliant on rain-fed agriculture. And we have said it before. We need to move to irrigated agriculture. And this will require investment in major dams. We have mapped out about 50 of them across the country. Energy sector, one of the reasons why investors find it hard to come to Kenya is because of the cost of energy. And that
everything John Mbadi is saying here is true. Everything is true. But what Mbadi is not putting into consideration is the maintenance. Because in Kenya, we do have roads. But the maintenance of those roads, let us start by maintaining the infrastructure that we already have. How about that? It is true that hii barabara ya kutoka Nairobi kuingia Uganda sometimes kuna issues, especially kutokea Malaba hadi Bungoma. Sometimes unapata kuna jamu hapo hivyo, kuanzia Malaba hadi Bungoma kuna jamu hivi. Yes, it is a good idea to ensure that hiyo barabara imepanuliwa so that many cars pass and economic activities are done as fast as possible. Lakini, how about overpricing projects? How about inflating the cost of items that are used kutengeneza hizi projects? Really? So these are the conversations we are supposed to have as a country. The corruption that is surrounding these projects. All of a sudden, sijui do imepotea wapi. Do you know that there are dams zilianza kujengwa in the 1990s? Akina Aror. So Mbadi is talking about the food problem, how we need to stop relying on rain, how we need to build infrastructure scar dams so that we engage in irrigation, farming, vitu kama hizo. But we need to address all the corruption that has been happening. And that is why we were asking earlier, have you established a protocol, a system whereby when our money is collected and put in a particular place, we are sure as a country the money is safe? And here's the worst one. Bei ya stima. Bei ya stima, the cost of energy in this country. And wadau, I'm not even gonna talk about that. Here is Bilo again and Sajid discussing how the prices of electricity in this country can ruin a business. How the prices of electricity alone can bring a business down.
I looked at KPLC bill. They charge 1,000 kilowatt hours a month. Okay, there's a calculation that you normally do. So in a month we estimate. Sorry, this is off on a tangent, but I'm just so you have 24 hours a day times an average of 30 days a month. Yeah, so you're looking 700 AC. Can we reduce AC? You're looking at 720 hours. But on the billable, it's 1,000. I'm not sure what that logic is. Maybe someone in the comments can explain why I'm being billed 1,000 kilowatt hours instead of 720. Even if you take 32 days, it's at 800 kilowatt hours. So where's that other 200 kilowatt hours coming from?
You know, Kenya Power.
Now listen to this. Pay attention, yapa hivi. Please pay attention.
And I say this always, and I've written about it many times, it's the most fraudulent institution in this country. Because they not only enjoy some sort of a protection that no other industry enjoys, but they take advantage of that also to try and use some very crooked ways of making revenue. They are the only institution that is compensated for against every external shock. For example, if you look at your bill, you will be charged for fuel adjustments. So if any fuel price is increased today, they are compensated for in your bill. If there is a forex adjustment, so if there's any exchange rate movement upwards, they are compensated for. On that bill of yours, it will be there. So, look, and then their rate that they charge, they can be charged by the producers of power, KenGen and so forth, is determined normally for them by government. So KenGen cannot just charge them what they want. Government will say, no, don't charge this much to KPLC, charge only this amount. Then the government occasionally bails them out. Uhuru gave them billions of shillings, quite significant, almost up to 7 billion. But they said, our profits are low. We're making a loss. They are not allowed to make a loss. When they make a loss, they claim. So you see, how
do you make a loss when you're the main?
This is a business. So, how do we make a loss when you are compensated for everything? Because the reason is because it's the worst place where corruption takes place in this country. That's Kenya Power. So all this, that's why they have all these challenges about 5 main products that they do. That is reserved normally for the big boys. And that's where all the corruption happens. The transformers, the cables, the conductors, the meters.
But I've heard even the powering plants, for example, the kilowatt hour rates, some of these private entities are used to resell.
That's what I'm coming to. You see now, that's the one I'm coming to. So what happened now over the years is, once upon a time we had a drought. And so the hydroelectric powers, went down because the water levels were down.
Yeah.
So they came up with these thermal power producers. So you are given an opportunity to put up a thermal power plant somewhere. The rate at which you charge. Remember, the import of that fuel you're using, is done through the government, and you are given. You don't pay duties and those things on it. That fuel you're using in your thermal power plant. But at the same time, the rate that is being charged by the thermal power producers is crazy. I mean, when you compare, it can be up to 30-40 times more than what Kenyan would charge, or geothermal, guys would charge Kenya Power Light.
Yeah, if you're looking at 13,
it's crazy. So now what happens then? Everyone who came to power decided to put up his own. So the Kibaki guys put up theirs. Uhuru came, these guys put up
fantastic.
theirs. So Uhuru now, when things became very bad in the last term, you've set up a task force, you remember?
Yes.
Headed by someone who used to be with in Pricewaterhouse from the private sector. They came up with some very clear, recommendations, what needs to be done because things were going crazy. The power was becoming, we're having the most expensive power in the region, in the whole of Eastern Central South Africa. So that one of the reasons why many companies were moving out is not just because of the tax, but one of the key reasons why we are uncompetitive, apart from the cost of freight and taxes, is energy, the cost of energy. You go to Egypt, you are given energy more or less at free. You go to Ethiopia, it's more or less like free. You go to Uganda, it's the lowest. It's one of the lowest. So here, tiny little company, you're running a small office like this, you will end up paying, hundreds of thousands of shillings for power. So Uhuru set up that thing, and they came up with the recommendation: stop these things, cancel some of them, renegotiate them. Nothing happened. Our current guys came in, they said, we're going to deal with that. So Uhuru, I think just before when these guys came in, they stopped it. No further, there was a moratorium on it. Parliament said, no further thermal power producers will be licensed. Last week you saw it, they lifted it. Because the new team also needs it. You have to put up your plant somewhere. Salim and company, they need also to have their hands in the pie.
Yeah, Salim, are you hiring?
They have to. So that is what is happening. So, but look at it. When Uhuru Kenyatta came to power with William Ruto, one of the things that we really talked about is that this country had a capacity to produce 10,000 megawatts of power from geothermal.
10,000 megawatts.
Yes, geothermal is one of the most efficient in terms of emissions and all, in terms of the green, and it's cheap.
That's true.
Less cheaper than this whatever. 10,000, we would export it to all these countries in the region. So at the time, in the first budget policy statement, they said we will raise it to 5,000 immediately. I will produce up to 5,000 megawatts just from that thing. Our consumption was around 2,500 maximum. So what happened? Nothing is moving. And the investors have been coming in every time wanting to do geothermal. Even when President Ruto came in, you remember the Indonesians and many countries came in and said, we want to do geothermal. You saw it on the news.
Yeah.
Then nothing happens because these things are all tied to deals. Why would I allow you to produce a cheaper one when my thermal plant is going to shut down? If you do that, you get the point. So this is unfortunately, vested interests is one of the things that is killing this country. It's making things very expensive. So businesses are moving, investors are moving to countries where it's cheaper to produce this. So that's why we have now become a basket case. We are now a trading company. People are setting up in Tanzania, in Uganda, in Ethiopia, and all. Ethiopia was nothing a few years ago. When Uhuru came to power, Ethiopia's economy was nothing to write home about. Today, it's bigger than ours. Because it's cheaper to put up a plant there. Everything, in terms of everything.
Are they making it harder to put a solar?
So that's
They wanted to use Kenya Power to make it harder for us to install solar.
Yes, you remember they came up with a law to limit, because they said our incomes will go down. So Kenya Power was really arguing against people using solar in there, with these restrictions and so forth. But they would always argue solar is more expensive. But let me tell you, you have the cheapest source of energy, geothermal, that most countries in the world don't have.
That's so true.
Naivasha.
Yeah,
steam.
Naivasha,
just down there, you just drill a well. You're given a contract, you just drill a well. And I remember when I was the Shadow Finance Minister, the cost of drilling a well was about $2 million. By the time Uhuru's team was in, it was clocking $14 million to drill a well. Now God knows how much you'll be told it will cost. To generate that kind of power. So it's power is one of those areas that
But you know,
there's a lot of vested interest.
There's a push for the data centers as well. Now, Ruto also said that we want the Microsoft site over here, which they need 2,000 megawatts and so on and so forth. We have the geothermal capabilities. And yes, we have the capabilities to get cheap power. And if we can accommodate that, that means from a landscape perspective, data centers will want cheaper power because everything is being digitized, correct?
Look, this is not a story.
Yeah.
This is the government of the Republic of Kenya publishing that factor so many times that we have a potential for up to 10,000 megawatts of geothermal. They are not doing anything to exploit it. And I think the reason is because of the vested interest in the thermal power producers. Nobody wants to shut down those thermal. In fact, they have now lifted the moratorium and they're now allowing people to apply. So more thermal power generators will be coming in. So the cost of power will continue going up. And this is why then you hear all this about power ration stories coming in. We need not to be there. I think when you look at interests of individuals and these things, then the country suffers, and we are. That's why our cost of power is still crazy.
Yeah, Wadau. So that is Bill Okero, and I know we don't trust politicians. We don't really believe a thing they say most of the time, but from what I hear, Bill Okero is one of those decent politicians. I don't know to what extent, but kuna news kwamba huyu msee sio mbaya sana. So let's go back to Mbadi and keep listening to what Mbadi is saying about this energy thing, how they are going to solve this problem after they have established this National Infrastructure Fund. Yeah, here is Mbadi.
This is affecting direct foreign investment. Energy generation and energy transmission is a challenge. You need resources to do that. Our airport looks like that of the 1950s compared to other countries. And we have attempted through PPP, it didn't work. So what I'm saying in a nutshell, we need investment in infrastructure. But how then do we finance these infrastructure projects? Either by raising taxes, which is not an option because Kenyans already feel that they are overburdened with taxes. So you can't go there.
But now, and the issue with taxes ni kwamba there are so many inefficiencies when it comes to how we collect tax in Kenya. Do you know that out of the tens of millions of people who are supposed to be paying taxes in Kenya, it is only 7.9% who actually pay taxes? That is according to estimates done in 2019. Do you know that? And do you know that we most of the time we don't actually hit our goal? For example, if our plan is to collect 3 trillion Kenyan shillings, sometimes what tuna collect maybe 1.something trillion shillings, because this is how we come up with this figure. We usually go with tax to GDP. So if our GDP is 130 billion US dollars, we might say we want 17% or 15% of our GDP to be collected as tax revenue, kitu kama hiyo. But most of the time we don't hit those goals. And as a middle income country, we need at least 20% of tax to GDP in order to sustain, basic services, basic public services. Or else, to collect anything below 20%, we are going to suffer. Lakini hadi saizi, we are still having these conversations about, tax this, KRA, nini, we are losing this much money in a day. We are not supposed to be having those conversations. We are not supposed to be telling Kenyans that, we are going to add more taxes. The conversation we're supposed to be conducting right now is, we have fixed this inefficiency, and as a result, we have collected more money. Hii mambo ya kusema sijui taxes now, sijui nini, this is bullshit bana.
that route, unless you want to cause a civil unrest or unless you're just not concerned.
So
about
this
the
is the
plight of
route
the
that's
people.
the best one to take.
Let me just build my point, Janet, because I think we are losing the point here. We are losing the objective of this transaction. Now, the second thing that I would say is, if you can't raise taxes, then you borrow. Is there space for that? There is no space for that. So what you are left with is you have to look for other innovative ways of raising revenue, which are not debt creating. And so we have this mature asset, so to speak. What we are trying to do is what one would call in economics unlocking value of a mature asset. Now, we have this mature asset, and this is an asset that we could easily convert. So what are we converting it to do? We have decided as a government to create what we call National Infrastructure Fund. If you create a National Infrastructure Fund, this fund will, if you have resources in this fund, the fund will be tasked with the responsibility or given the responsibility and mandate to implement major infrastructure projects, especially those which are commercially viable, by crowding in private sector. Private sector has resources out there. Institutions have resources, including pension funds. But how do you link those resources with our public infrastructure, whereas we know very well that public infrastructure has some level of risk? So you must de-risk that by having a fund, by having an entity, an institution that would invest in that fund and then crowd in the private sector. That is why we are creating National Infrastructure Fund and Sovereign Wealth Fund. So how do you get seed money for this? The government has decided that what we do is we offload some of our share ownership in state-owned enterprises and get seed capital or seed funding into this fund, which then we will use to leverage and blend with the funding from the private sector to do this infrastructure. So as I finish, the summary is this. You are converting one asset to another. Because you see, this is an asset. We are shedding off 15%, converting that asset in Safaricom to public infrastructure assets, which again are value adding to the economy and also income generating and will pay back. So that is what we are doing in this space. We are not we are not offloading these shares to meet short-term budget deficits. We are not going to take this money to finance our budget in the ordinary sense of it. That is what we have said we are not doing, because that would amount to selling asset and consuming it.
Right.
But we must also maintain what we call intergenerational wealth. And there must be intergenerational equity. We invest this for the future generations as well.
Yep. Wadau, that is your guy, John Mbadi, talking about creating intergenerational wealth. With all the corruption that happens in Kenya, I don't think that is gonna work. I don't have faith in the Kenyan system, kabisa. The administration, no, maze. Like with all the corruption that is happening, and people are not being held accountable, no consequences whatsoever. And you want to set aside billions of shillings, bro, people will run through that money like nobody's business. And then he's also talking about seed money. Yeah, that is actually a good idea. You know, what these guys are saying are actually good ideas, especially the Sovereign Wealth Fund. I am not against such a thing. The only reason why I have concerns and doubts is because when it comes to execution, that is where the problem arises. Kenya does not, or Kenyans, I mean politicians in Kenya, don't have a history or the history of transparency. They always like shady stuff, lying, stealing and stuff. That is why we are concerned as citizens, okay? And when Mbadi says that he's unlocking value by taking these assets, these mature assets to do other projects, I think that is more of transferring value. It is transferring value and not unlocking value. We will hear Ndidi Nyoro talk and you will understand what actually it means to try to unlock value. Sawa. So wadau, here is Bill Okero again talking about taxes, because a couple of minutes ago nimekuwa nikizungumzia kuhusu taxes, and you'll be surprised to know that Kenyans, our government, collect more taxes than our regional neighbors. Uganda doesn't do that. As a matter of fact, we collect more taxes than all of these guys combined. Chukua Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Somalia, put them together. They don't come close to the amount of taxes we collect as a country. Listen to Bilo.
Look, we raise the highest amount of revenue in the whole of East African region. In fact, we raise more tax revenues than all the other East African countries combined. We have done that from the time Kibaki came to power. And this I've repeated so many times. I remember there was a fact check by the South African firm and last year, and even Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi combined, all of those for 5 countries, we generate more revenue. So our issue has never been about tax collection. It's about how we spend it. Now, when it comes to, because we raise about close to now 30 billion, is what we are going to generate in taxes, dollars, that nearly $30 billion. Now, the question is on the expenditure. And that is where, from the time Kibaki came to power, I remember Joseph Kinyua is the first one who made, Anyang' Nyong'o is the one who made that statement, first when he was the Minister for Planning, that 30% of our taxes, our expenditure, is lost in corruption, wastage, inefficiencies. That statement of 30 was repeated by so many people, including Kinyua when he was Joseph Kinyua when he was the head of public service, and many others. And again, it's another that has been done, fact-checked on confirmed, because I keep repeating this all the time. And Uhuru also is the last one who said it's about 2 billion per day. It comes to the 30%, of our revenue disappearing through, our taxes disappearing through corruption. So if you are collecting 3 trillion, what you're saying is 1 trillion is going to be lost to corruption, to inefficiencies and mismanagement and all those things, combined. So then if you are elected to power, why don't you focus on that to try and save that 1 trillion? Why do you want to raise another 1 trillion through taxes? That should be your focus. And this is what no one wants to do, because when you start working on corruption, you will lose friends. You lose friends because the guys whom you want to appoint a minister, the reason why he wants to be a minister or he wants to go into government is make money. Government has become the place to make money. It's not about leadership. Government nowadays, from members of parliament getting into power, is all about making money. Why do you want to go and kanyaga factory kama Mwindia ati you go through politics?
Yeah, it's so
the
true.
guy walks into parliament and walks on a bicycle into parliament. He walks out with a
Land Cruiser, yeah.
So our problem has never been money. Our problem has never been revenue. Our problem has always been corruption, inefficiencies, and incompetent leaders. Leaders who don't care. Leaders who are not accountable. Leaders who don't care about consequences. Let's keep listening to Bilo.
If we don't deal with corruption, the issue of taxes will continue going up. And in the short term, I don't see any difference, really. There's no restructuring. This country has moved on from being low income, whatever, the classification done normally, to what they call is a middle income country. And so you don't enjoy some of those benefits of debt restructuring and so forth, or debt write-offs.
Yeah.
And you don't get those things anymore. But I think there is a way in which, even with all their corruption, they can get some of the things done. For example, one of some of the things that Ruto is trying to do, which I support, like on the Safaricom cell, 2 things I want to comment on. One, state corporations account for a significant amount of these debts, by the way. The total amount of debts out of this, nearly $1 trillion, actually, you could say, is state corporations. So, what happens is you have a state corporation like Kenya Pipeline Company. It collects money left, right, and center. For every liter of petrol that is pumped from Mombasa port, pumped to Nairobi or to Eldoret, the pipeline, they'll charge, those days I was in petroleum many years ago, it was $4 per cubic meter. So I think now probably it's more than that, per cubic meter. So it's a cash cow. It generates hundreds of millions every month. So, but then what is the return to government? How much does the government get? And this happens to all, Kenya Airways, to every of these institutions, Kenya Pipeline, Kenya Power, Kenya what. So this idea of selling some of these state institutions, government does not need to be in business. These things have been there to prop up political appointees and give government guys money, because that's where you make a lot of money. So that's why I like this idea of selling some of these assets, getting some revenue to reduce your debt. Like now, this story of Kenya Safaricom sales for 15%, get some 250 billion or something, and use it for infrastructure. It's a better deal than just put it there and it's used for political appointees, and people are making money on the sides, and the country is not benefiting much from some of this. The government has still 250 state corporations. About 40-50 of them are in commercial sector. Government is in banking, government is selling chicken, government is in taxis, government is in every possible thing. Some of them have zero return, absolutely. If you go now to Kenatco in the airport and take a taxi for Kenatco, you just pay the driver by M-Pesa. But here's a GK number place, it belongs to the government. So some of these things have no... So me, I got disappointed when I see some leaders criticizing the sale of Kenya Pipeline. I mean, it really doesn't... For me, it's better to get some 300-400 billion, put it into some fund which can generate money for it to be used for infrastructure. And that way the government has less pressure dealing with hundreds of these institutions just to serve political purposes and appoint you into a chairmanship and board members and what. And this is
Yeah, Wadau, that is Bilo. I don't know if you're listening to him. I don't know if you're listening to what Bilo is saying, and I don't know if you understand what he's saying. Bilo is telling us that sometimes let us not be quick to complain when the government wants to make a strategic move. Kwa sababu, he's saying that selling some of these state corporations is actually a plus on our side. And I kind of trust him. I don't know Bilo, but from what I hear, he was a decent politician. Sawa. And considering the fact that the government is pumping millions, sometimes even hundreds of millions of shillings just to service these state corporations so that they can run their daily activities, or they can, be bailed out of debt and stuff like that, maybe they should be run by private entities. Maybe they should be run by private entities, so that the government focuses primarily on providing services, quality services to its citizens. I think that's a good idea. I didn't know that, but the point of these videos and these podcasts, you gotta learn, man. Sawa. So, I know some people are maybe confused. Where does Ndindi Nyoro stand in this entire thing? Why exactly is he against this transaction? He's not against the sale. Ndindi Nyoro is okay with that. What Ndindi Nyoro is not okay with is the pricing, the valuation of the shares. Now, I want you to listen to what Ndindi Nyoro is saying. We are done with John Mbadi, and we have interrogated his ideas, and we're gonna come to a verdict at the end of the video. But right now, let us look at what Ndindi Nyoro has to say about the same thing. Let us understand his points accurately.
From where I sit as Ndindi Nyoro, I don't talk about these things in terms of politics. If there is value that can be gotten and Kenya gets the rightful value for Safaricom, we would all be happy. And I listened to my elder brother, Honorable John Mbadi. He was on in TV stations yesterday and today morning. And he put a challenge that in fact today he was saying he was wishing I would be there so that we discuss that matter. I want to, from this platform, respectfully tell my brother, Honorable Mbadi, I have taken up the challenge. When you are ready, I am ready, and in a TV station of your choice. And as you come with all the stakeholders, come with all the stakeholders involved in the sale of Safaricom. Because we are not doing it for politics, as I'm repeating. I want to ask very pertinent questions on behalf of Kenyans. And because he drew the challenge, I also return in kind that when he is ready, including Monday, I am also ready in any TV station with any moderator of his choice so that Kenyans can get value for money in the sale of Safaricom.
Have you heard what Ndindi Nyoro has said? Ndindi Nyoro is not against the transaction. Ndindi Nyoro wants the highest bidder to come and give us as much money as possible. So he is all about, okay, go ahead, sell it. But we want as much value extracted from this transaction as possible. Now, hii mambo ya kusema ati, we just give Vodacom because they are one of the majority owners of Safaricom, so they're not going to disrupt the entire ecosystem. There will be no chaos, people coming in with different ideas and stuff. No, bro. Like we are scared of restructuring or Safaricom stuff like that. No, I don't think that's a problem. That is not our problem. Yes, but the government of Kenya has 20% stake in Safaricom. It still owns 20% of Safaricom. But if you're selling such a significant chunk of your stake, so you get as much money as possible. And that's exactly what Ndindi Nyoro is saying. Ebu, let's keep listening to him.
Chairman, I would want this committee to investigate further because the buyer we are having is not beyond reproach. If we are dealing with a buyer who is beyond reproach, the market would quiet and no one would have an issue. But then we are here dealing with a buyer who has already proven to the Kenyan people that they cannot be trusted, and especially with integrity. When Safaricom share was being listed, I was working for a stockbroker when I was in university.
I want you to note here that the buyer that Ndindi Nyoro is referring to is Vodafone or Vodacom. That is the group that wants to buy the 15% stake that the government of Kenya is selling. Sawa? So, every time Ndindi Nyoro says buyer, replace buyer with Vodacom or Vodafone.
And therefore I have the details of that listing. Chairman, there was a company called Mobitelea, which owned 5% of Safaricom by the time of listing. Previously, they owned more. If you look at the listing memoranda of Safaricom, this was how the shares were allocated. 35% was to be listed, 35% was GOK. 35% was our buyers. 40% in the market, which we all own. Now, Chairman, in the current memoranda, which was released by the same buyers, they now have 40%. Let me rephrase so that I am on record, I am correct. By the time of listing, 35% was GOK. That's 35%. 35% was our buyers. That is 70%. 5% was a company called Mobitelea, which was a vehicle of political patronage. The amount that was listed in the NSC was 25%, not the statement I had said before. So we listed 25%, it is in the market. All of a sudden, in this memoranda, now government has 35%, but our buyers already bought Mobitelea. So it means then the buyers were in cahoots with Mobitelea. Can Kenyans trust this company to be above board when it comes to this transaction when they already have shown their true colors in terms of integrity insofar as Mobitelea is concerned? Second one, and this one members take it now just like the one for quotation precedent. Seriously. Chairman, we are here being told about market price of Safaricom, but there is something we are not being told. That the Safaricom share price has some shades of the company share having been suppressed in the last 1 year. In June of this year, when the buyers knew there would be this transaction, they did something clever. They immobilized their shares, 16 billion shares. They immobilized their shares for the first time since the listing. Do you think that is normal, Chair? Immobilization means this. The shares were in certificate form, just like many other government like many other government stakes, they are not in the market. They are usually held even in certificate form. So what happens, you have to mobilize this share to go into the CDSC. So what did our buyers do? They immobilized 16 billion shares. What does that do? It sends signals to the market of an increase in supply of the same share. So what did the share do? Just exactly as the buyers intended. The share became suppressed. So as the market has been so bullish in Kenya, in other counters, Safaricom bullish but measured. Why? Because the market is already signaled that there is a 16 billion immobilized share by somebody who can sell today. Sell meaning they can supply to the market today afternoon. That CMA has to investigate whether there is even any share out of the 16 billion that has been offloaded out of the immobilized stake. Chair, as I go to the close, transaction, I had the National Treasury talks about KCB. This is how this market works, Chair. And I'm saying it in good faith and in humility. If you want to know, there is no other hand. One, and especially in the transaction cost, because it is abnormal. Transaction costs in the NSC, they are based on some parameters. And the more, the cheaper. If you buy 2 shares today worth the 2,000 shillings, in percentage, you may end up paying a higher commission, but it's already capped at 2%. So you can't pay more than 2%. But what the brokers do, the more the weight of the transaction, the cheaper the commission. Now, when I heard that Kenya is paying a commission of an average of 1.5%, then I knew this is a red flag. You just need to do one thing as a committee. Tell KCB to do in writing whether they have something called a stockbroker's agent. That will cure that maneno. They do in writing to commit themselves. Because being a listed company, they'll still report in their financial year whether there is any cost that was incurred in this commission. Stockbrokers agents, how would they do? You go to a stockbroker and say, this is my deal. And then you are put into the system as an agent. Then you are given between 35 to 50% of the commissions your client generates. So you just need to ask KCB in writing whether in this transaction there is a stockbroker's agent. Because if there is one, second question is, why do you actually need an agent? A company that is already being controlled by GOK. KCB, the chairman, is appointed by government, and the board composition is appointed by government based on the 19% stake. So why would you need an agent for you to connect Kengen to Kenya Power, for example? Why? So, chairman, whatever savings we make, it should go to the Kenyan people. But the way to cure that, let them commit. And then Parliament will check later whether in this transaction there was associated cost of an agent, because that is how things can happen. Lastly, the way forward, I have always said it, and I know 100%, Kenya may end up getting over 350 billion Kenya shillings if we fall part of them. And the many suggestions that I have heard from many people who have appeared before you, Chair. One, this issue of listing Safaricom came up even when I was in the corridors of power. So it's not something new to me. And therefore, whatever I'm saying is just to remind even the people who are there today. But there were better proposals than now. Why are we falling back to inferior proposals? The proposal which I would give, which even them they know, break Safaricom into 3.
Now, without this is what we call unlocking value. The other thing that Mbadi was saying about that was akin to transferring value. Now, this what Ndindi Nyoro is going to talk about, breaking Safaricom into 3, into a fintech, into a tower company, and into a telecommunication company. Like, now that is unlocking value.
And you're not doing anything much. Breaking in paper, you're not breaking it like with Nyundo. Break Safaricom into a telco. Number 2 into a fintech. And number 3 into a tower company. The sum total of the 3 will be much more valuable than the whole. That's one. The second option, that is one option. The second option, if we really need money so fast and you don't have time to break down, it is very simple. It will take us very little time to list Safaricom PLC in the London Stock Exchange. The London Stock Exchange now, they are actually begging people to list in London because the global market have tilted towards America. So the LSE is now dry in terms of listing. If you show a signal you want to list, they can even send their finance minister here in Kenya tomorrow to list in the LSE. Once we list in the LSE, we expose Safaricom into the global markets. So people who don't know Safaricom, they only know M-Pesa, they'll get to know there is this profound company called Safaricom. It is actually the owner of M-Pesa, because M-Pesa is actually more known globally than Safaricom. What does that do? It creates interest. Chairman, after that, within the same option. After listing the LSE, open bids, international bids. For only 2 months, Kenya will be surprised that we will have people bidding even above the current consideration because of the other parameters that I gave. And I can bet to you, Chairman, and this issue is very weighty in my heart, is very heavy in my heart. The market already knew that Etisalat wanted to buy Vodacom. It was already known in the market. And therefore, I will not be surprised if our buyers today, next month, they are on sale. Why can't Kenya be patient for 2 months? We go directly to the main buyer and we get the right valuation. When we open an international bid, I can guarantee you we'll have the same buyers bidding at a higher price. We'll have Orit bidding at a higher price. You'll have Etisalat themselves bidding. You can have investment vehicles like BlackRock bidding, like Blackstone. Eventually, Kenya will get more, as the story I gave about Rea Vipingo. So my submission, Chairman, is let us open this bid to international bidders. And we lose nothing. If Kenya gets an additional 150 billion, I thought the mileage will go to government. They'll build more roads. So, everyone benefits. Why can't we be patient for 2 months and we get a higher price, Chairman? Thank you very much. And as I submit, we look about the dividend. This is another securitization, as you know, of dividend. I would want to know even from the committee, maybe separately. There's something called MTDS, whether it's actually part of it. We are now securitizing dividend. This dividend was part of our Appropriations Act, the current one. Because part of our revenues, the dividend is part of it. So we have securitized. I may ask many questions even about the current IPO that is ongoing. The proceeds were part of the Appropriations Act. So don't we see a mismatch? We have securitized dividend for the next many years, yet in our long-term and medium-term planning as a country, it is already accounted for as a revenue direct to the consolidated fund. I think Kenyans deserve answers on that.
Before we proceed with more from Ndindi Nyoro, you have heard the man himself. So I hope he has made it abundantly clear that he is not against the transaction. He is not against the government of Kenya selling 15% of its stake in Safaricom, because hiyo itafanya nini? Itabado tutakuwa na 20% pale Safaricom. But the only thing that Ndindi Nyoro is concerned about is, let us ensure that when we are selling this huge chunk of our ownership, let us ensure that we get as much money as possible. Yeah? And we have also seen that Ndindi Nyoro is hinting to the, existence of some elements of corruption in this entire process, where, people are colluding in unnecessary ways. Like, there is an element of corruption. There are people who are doing things that are not supposed to be happening in this transaction, basically. And we have also seen him say that, let us wait, okay? Let us wait. Let us list Safaricom to London Stock Exchange. Let us bring, global eyes to Safaricom. Let people see that there is there's a company here that has potential to grow. As a matter of fact, if you break Safaricom into three, into a fintech, into a telecom, and into a tower company, investors are gonna come in, because they are investors who don't want to invest in fintech and telecommunication, but they want to invest in the tower company or tower business. So people who want to invest in that business alone will have an opportunity to do such a thing. And Safaricom will make more money, because other telecommunication companies such as Airtel, maybe MTN, Orange, will want to use the towers that Safaricom already has ownership to. And that means more money to Safaricom. And we have seen him say there is a very high likelihood that this company called Etisalat that has been showing interest in buying Vodacom, a company that wants to buy the 15% that we are offering, that there is a very high possibility that Vodacom will be selling their 55% to Etisalat after we sell to them. So Ndindi Nyoro is like, why don't we wait? So we just wait for Etisalat to come and buy our 15% at a higher price per share, and we make more money. Like, all we have to do is maybe wait for 2 months. Why the hurry? So that is Ndindi Nyoro. Let us keep listening to him.
Withdraw chair, even if I'm to end my discussion here, because my presentation today, history will prove me right. I know, and I'll table at the right time.
But you see, you've mentioned it in this committee.
Chairman, who authorized the Communications Authority to commit to give a discount to Safaricom in the renewal of 5 licenses, which some I have tabulated in my memorandum? That Kenya in that respect is losing close to 100 billion Kenya shillings on conditions precedent. This we have already promised the buyer. We have told them, you buy us out, you'll pay half the license fee. Half the license fee in terms of billions of shillings. Money enough to make basic education in Kenya free today. So the Communications Authority, the management, went ahead to commit Kenya to a loss of over close to 100 billion Kenya shillings on conditions precedent. The board had not met when the management of CA did that. And I would want them to table to this committee when the board of CA met to actually discuss about not any other matter, the conditions precedent that we have given to the buyers, where Kenya is losing over 100 billion shillings. So we are here talking about 2 or 4 billion, but the net amount of money we are actually getting as Kenya is 1 or 4 billion, because 100 billion shillings is already lost in conditions precedent. Chairman, if there is one thing that you have to stop, is that one, because there is no basis. Secondly, some of the licenses that other players in the market are getting for 15 years, the buyer cornered us as Kenya to put on a length of 25 years. Members, my brothers and sisters, we are here committing our country for the next 25 years. And I'd want all of us to add 25 years to the age that we already have. and we commit that we can continue answering these questions, that we committed Kenya to a loss of 100 billion, that we are willing to answer that question until if you are 40, you are 65. And what is the basis of even this condition precedent? It is just absurd, Chair. And this must stop. And some of these conversations that were done, that we take this discussion and this transaction so light that we are doing phone calls. Phone calls where Kenya is losing 100 billion shillings, that make this letter to the, when the transaction happened, Chair, it was a hurry because I thought this is the only person who can bail us out because we are nearing election, we need money. Chairman, have you looked at mobile termination rates? What conditions precedent did we give to the buyers? Conditions precedent, and as I'm repeating, is this, Chair. You want to sweeten the deal. In the markets, we say sweetening the deal. So that, okay, I'm selling this cow, but I'm also selling with the calf. You try to sweeten. So, the condition precedent we gave is actually bigger than what we are selling. So we lose money on one hand through CA, one on licenses, 5 of them, over 100 billion shillings. Secondly, on this other side, Chair, we are here now pushing Kenyans into a corner through mobile termination rates. I know you'll do that homework.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Nilikuwa najua hii condition president is bad, but I never knew that it's bad to that extent. What is condition president? First of all, conditions president, let me define it. Condition president is a specific requirement that must be fulfilled before a contract becomes effective. Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, one party is telling the other party that we are not going to go through with the business and sign the deal and finish the transaction until you do A, B, C, D. So in this arrangement, one party is getting the bad end of the deal. And in this scenario, Kenya, the government of Kenya, the people of Kenya are the ones who are getting the bad end of the deal, wadau. Now that is conditions president. Because Nyoro has said it very clearly kwamba a communications authority has been cornered to a point whereby they have decided to allow Vodacom to escape with 100 billion. And then, iyo mambo ya licensing. We make some money, by licensing these things to these people. Now imagine somebody pays 50 million for 15 years. That is how it's supposed to be. But now, Vodacom wamekuja wakaambia Kenyans hapana. We are going to pay 50 million for 25 years. Imagine losing money for 10 consecutive years. Do you understand that? And you have to understand something with condition president. These things has to be signed. This contract has to be signed before the accomplishment of the transaction. That is how bad this thing is. So mkisikia Ndindi Nyoro analia, it is, bro, ni kubaya maze. Let us now listen to what John Mbadi had to say about Ndindi Nyoro's reply and everything, because Mbadi's response was an insult that Ndindi Nyoro is supposed to, intuitively know these things. He doesn't have time to educate the likes of Ndindi Nyoro, people who are supposed to, understand. And yet, I don't see him in Mbadi making any sense here. I truly don't see that. Ebu sikiza huyu mse.
Someone who claims to be understanding, please give me a break. I cannot be spending all my time responding to your ignorance. It is sickening. How fast we will achieve this depends on our commitment as a country.
Responding to your ignorance. And they are talking about achieving first world status. Transforming Kenya from, a third world country to a first world country. Skiza ijaba.
The president has a vision and he has spoken to it. The government has a vision which the president has elaborated about 10 years. But you see, achieving first world status, you can do it faster than even 10 years, depending on how you are committed. But if you are not so committed again, it will take us...
This guy is over ambitious. Bro, achieving first world status in less than 10 years with all the corruption that is in Kenya, with all the unemployment that exists in Kenya, with all the impunity and underfunding that these startups that are essential to Kenya's economies, bro, they're...
Well, so what we must demonstrate now is to believe in government first. I know that believability has gone down. I don't know why. A lot of politics around. Even things that have worked, no one wants to accept they have worked. And if it has worked, then you keep quiet. If it has not worked, you shout, which is okay. But what I'm saying is, if we remain committed and we stay to the course, and we allow this National Infrastructure Fund to be set, we avoid unnecessary litigation. And
no, bro, no. Nimekataa hiyo. At we avoid unnecessary litigation. Bro, look at these guys. Look at this guy. Abana, that's a red flag. That is a fucking red flag.
Unnecessary politics and saying things that we probably don't understand. Where someone wakes up from his house and starts saying the price of Safaricom should be 75. Another one talks about it was 45. Yeah? Without elaborating to you what made it to be 45. You know, capital markets, the way they operate, I don't know whether these people really understand how capital markets operate. Those of us who have studied capital markets, how they operate, we know that always prices are dictated by signals. Like, for example, if today I was having a business somewhere and you strike some gold, the prices of shares in that area will just go up because there is anticipation. So that is exactly what happened to Safaricom in 2021 when there was the announcement that we were expanding to Ethiopia. So the prices went up. When the market didn't respond as investors thought, the prices came down. That is how capital markets respond and react. And you get a politician who does not even take his time to engage his brain properly in how capital markets work. Then it was 45 shillings in 20. So why is it 28 today? He's not explaining to you that because his mind is stuck like a gramophone in some kind of political discourse that doesn't really help much. But I know some of them will start saying that is arrogant. But sometimes you get tired of explaining to people who should be understanding. If you claim to have studied economics, then you should reason better. I have no problem. I can explain to other Kenyans 1,000 times to understand. But someone who claims to be understanding, please give me a break. I cannot be spending all my time responding to your ignorance. It is sickening. So I would respond to other Kenyans who don't understand, but not someone who has studied economics, studied finance, studied statistics. You should understand some of these basic concepts.
All right, you've heard the man. He's saying that I can't be spending all my time educating ignorance and stuff. But he has said something kind of interesting. He has been talking about signals and anticipation. How anticipation also influence the share prices. And I don't know why can somebody have all that knowledge and still go wrong. Because most of the time share prices are not set by what a company is worth today. Most of the time share prices are set by the future worth of a company. So investors kind of speculate that the value of this company is going to increase. Therefore, just by anticipating such a thing, the prices of a share naturally increase. Ndio sometimes unapata tech companies are making losses. They are losing money left, right and center. But unapata the shares of that particular company are very high because investors anticipate that the value of that company is going to increase. That in the future, people are finally going to recognize this company and they are going to appreciate the value that this company is creating in the marketplace. You have to understand that. And wadau, I don't want to make this video unnecessarily long. Let us finally listen to Ndindi Nyoro encouraging us to invest in stocks.
12 million. But you know, you took years to buy a car, eh? But you also bought a plot. Ukobere uko na plot. Sawa, basi yeta we use the shares. Uniambie. This person with the shares, ask them for money. They'll come with it after 2 days. Kenya is something called T+2. When you sell your shares today, after 2 days, the money is in your bank. Take Kengen. By July, it was 5 shillings. July this year. Now, is around 8.5 thereabout. It seems very small money, but it means your 500,000 in July is now 850, and you're already waiting for dividend of 90 cents, which is 90,000, another money on top of that. So that's why I keep on talking about this every day. The stock market in Kenya is undervalued. Undervaluation mostly comes up because of information gap. You go study. What other people don't know is what benefits you. Because you see a glaring opportunity. When you see a glaring opportunity, you take note, you act, but other people are still buying plots and cars. Then later on, you still buy a car, but instead of that one your Fred has, you'll buy the other one now you'll have. You know which one. You'll still buy the plot, but you not buy the plot that other interior place. You'll buy this other one near the road, that place you know. That is the beauty about investment, and it's not gambling. You are investing in a company, you are getting shares, you become a shareholder, you go to the AGM, you can ask questions, you can give inputs, and you grow it. And very lastly, I invest in it and I vote for it because many other investment instruments don't have life. When you buy a treasury board, you are told, or a treasury board, you are paid per annum but half yearly. But the money you invested, the 1 million, after 10 years, if it's a 10-year board, you still get it at 1 million. It has no life. But if I buy a share in Equity Bank, people who bought when it was just Kenya, it expires to Ethiopia, it's getting life. It's like buying dama. Dama is a calf. Umenunua ikiwa a calf. This calf bears a calf. It starts producing milk. This other calf gets another calf. The calf gets another calf. And the calf is called a herd. Investing in a company is in that manner. Because company has life, it keeps on growing.
A company has life, it keeps on growing. By that statement, you can conclude that Ndindi Nyoro thinks like a chess player. They don't think about now, they think about the future. And that is the main takeaway from this video, okay? Because both Mbadi and Ndindi Nyoro have ideas. And Mbadi's ideas are not stupid. NIF, the National Infrastructure Fund, is not a bad idea. The Sovereign Wealth Fund is not a bad idea. But it all comes to execution. It all comes to execution. The only problem with Mbadi is that he's not being honest with himself. He also knows that in Kenya, we don't have the ethical system that can actually protect all this money. People are so dishonest, and our judiciary system is incapable of even scaring these people from stealing the money that we want to set aside for these amazing infrastructural developments. It's not a bad idea, but do we have the mechanisms to protect it? It's not a bad idea, but do we have the system that is going to ensure that the security of these big resources is actually guaranteed? Unanipata wadau? But Ndindi Nyoro is thinking this guy is thinking in generations. And, you know, Mbadi is like a CFO who doesn't have money in his company and he needs money urgently to inject into his company for things to run. But Ndindi Nyoro is thinking like a regulator. He wants to make sure that, you know, the wealth that we want to transfer to another person is creating more value to us. As much value as possible. Unanipata? So, Nyoro is thinking about the future. Ndindi Nyoro is thinking about, okay, someday in the future, we look back and say, maybe we made a mistake selling Safaricom shares at a throwaway price. And the other thing I have realized is that this is just my opinion. I could be wrong, but they have different perspectives when it comes to how to actually value, you know, Safaricom as a, you know, as a company and the valuation of shares in Safaricom. Because from what I see, from my point of view, I think Mbadi is determining the prices of the share based on market value, while Ndindi Nyoro is pricing the shares based on true value. True value and market value are two different things. So I think there is that confusion, and maybe if they sit down and just clear this confusion and make sure that every single person understands the other individual's perspective, where they come from, how they define these things, how they define these terminologies, maybe they might come to, you know, a coherent, you know, understanding. Or they might provide us, the citizens of this country, the people who are supposed to be more concerned about this particular affair, a clear picture on what exactly is going on. So wadau, in that juncture, imekuwa vida refu, I know, but sometimes we gotta do what we gotta do. These are very important things happening in our country. These are important events. These are, you know, pivotal moments in our country. So we can't just take them for granted. For people who are going to watch this video, for people who have watched this video till this moment right now, Maze, I salute you. You are the real patriots. You know, we really love our country. Now let us keep on having these conversations. Hata kutoka hapa hivi in the comment section, let's keep talking. Let us keep talking. Wadau, adios Maze. Adios Maze. Hey, adios. Adios. Bye.